the college football playoff comes out and talks to us, which that's nice of them to do. We certainly appreciate that. And they say that there will be no changes to their format until the realignment dust settles. That means the top 6 conference champs still get an automatic bid. I'm trying real hard to determine who the top 6 conferences are after this year. So, I mean, they're going to have to adjust it by the time the 12-team playoff kicks in. So what statement does this actually make?
What this basically says is they're basically openingly saying, we don't think the ACC is long for this world, so we're just going to wait till the ACC collapses before we change our format.
You jumped ahead of me. That's what I was going to say. So who are the conferences left out?
So right now, the top 6
conference. Pac-12.
I'm sorry.
We know the Pac-12 is going to get left out, right?
The Pac-12 is not going to exist next year.
Right. So it's out. It's not one of the.
Yeah. So it's not who's going to get left out. It's who's going to get in. So the SEC, Big 12, Big 10, and unfortunately ACC champs will get automatic bids in 2024. That's going to happen.
Okay, so if you had to predict the ACC falls apart before 2024 and that affects the college football playoff, you would say not next year, but soon. Is that your answer?
Right.
I'm going to disagree with you there. I think there's just too much bubbling up to the surface with the Florida State thing, with the teams meeting. Listen, there's this union mentality with the ACC because of the long television contract, but I think that's been chipped away at. And I've seen a union basically lose all of its power at the Knoxville News Sentinel. They had a guild, which is a union, and it's basically the same thing. And used to be the old joke was if you came into the office and shot and killed somebody, there had to be 6 witnesses before you would get fired. And if there weren't 6 witnesses, you would probably get retained. Well, they slowly lost their power over time. I think the ACC as a, air quote, union has lost their power, and I think the final push will be in the next offseason. I think it was really close to happening over the past couple of months. So I'm going to say both the Pac-12's out, which they won't exist, like you said, and the ACC will be out by next year.
Wow. Okay, so what if they don't change the format then? Because the SEC, Big 12, and Big 10 is it. Who are the other 3 conference champions? The American and the Mountain West, maybe.
I think the Mountain West, if you can add Stanford and Cal, is good enough.
Okay, Mountain West.
I'm okay with the Mountain West.
Then the American, which is basically those teams that vied for the Big 12 but couldn't get in. The Tulane, South Floridas, UTSAs, Navy, Temple, those type. The old Conference USA, honestly, from the 90s. So that we're at 5. And then what? Conference USA or Sun Belt? I mean, the integrity of this is laughable if you put a Sun Belt team in the college football playoff.
Well, it's kind of laughable with Conference USA, isn't it? Who's the best? What are the best teams in Conference USA?
Let's see. Texas San Antonio, who Tennessee plays, has won the Conference USA the last 2 years, and they're now in the American. So I don't MTSU. What if MTSU is in the playoff?
I think you'll cut it down to 4 automatic bids by next year. I think no ACC and no.
That's the best. Cut it down to 4 because SEC, Big 12. I wouldn't even do 4 automatic. What I do is, I would do 4 automatic, but I do it differently. The SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 get automatic bids, period, no matter what. I don't care where they're ranked. The champions of those 3 conferences get automatic bids. And then the best team of the other conferences gets an automatic bid.
Now, Travis brings up a good point. He says, Dave, you're wrong. The media loves ACC teams, Clemson, Florida State. You know how it is. They do, but I think they'll love Clemson and Florida State somewhere else.
So, they're going to be in the SEC. The media is not kowtowing for Pittsburgh, guys. They're not going to get in love to throw Pittsburgh into the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I want to see where Notre Dame ends up in this thing. Do you realize Notre Dame is essentially saying that they can be no better if they're relevant in the college football playoff? And they'll be relevant with 12 teams. They're not going to be relevant with 4 if that were the path that the sport was going. But if Notre Dame continues to be independent, where do they fit in? Because you're basically telling them if the top 4 have to be conference champions, which is what we're saying, right? That's where we are right now. Then here's what Notre Dame has. They have a $50 to $60 million television contract, which I've been told is going to be signed here in the next few months. They have the ability to schedule who they want to schedule, which there's something cool about that. They don't get locked into having to play an overly difficult schedule. And they play a pretty cool schedule. I mean, let's be honest, when you include the teams that they play. And but they're saying, without being a part of a conference, that they're never going to get a bye ever in the college football playoff. You're saying at best you can do is 5, which means you host a 12. A 12 Cincinnati, let's just say, and I'm saying, let's say they came in at 12 a couple of years ago, or at 12 TCU, let's say some team in that realm that sneaks into the playoffs, they can go to Notre Dame and win. Notre Dame's not uber talented. I know we just did the talented list and they were higher than Tennessee, but I'm just here to tell you a lot of those stars come from, they are Notre Dame. I mean, those teams can go there and win. Let's take, for instance, let's say Tennessee's 12 next year and Notre Dame's 5. Are you telling me Tennessee can't go to Notre Dame and win? Are you telling me that if
I think they would win this year?
Okay, let's say Alabama's 12 and they had to go to Notre Dame. Let's say the third SEC team gets in. The third SEC team can go to Notre Dame and win. Would you agree with that?
Totally agree.
I mean, they got to do something or get off the pot, as the saying is.
I'm going to go a step further. This contract Notre Dame signs is going to be the last contract they sign before they join a conference. Because here's what's going to happen. I'm sorry?
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. So the Big Ten's new deal, even with Oregon and Washington joining, and by the way, they're joining at a discount, but say they paid all 18 teams equally, it would be $55 million already. Now, I think they're going to up their TV deal. On top of that, being Oregon and Washington less. So really we're talking 61, 62 million-ish probably per team. And Notre Dame, you said their contract's going to be 60 million now. So Notre Dame, a direct TV contract, is not getting as much now as Northwestern is playing in the Big Ten, which is crazy. I think the Big Ten has now gotten big enough. And when the SEC does its next round of negotiations in 2035, and by the way, maybe before then, I'm really hoping they do. I think you think they will get out of this contract with ESPN, right, Dave? With the $300 million. There's no way they can keep that going.
That the SEC can get out of the ESPN contract?
Yes. At least force ESPN to renegotiate.
Yeah, probably, but I don't know that they need to. I've been told by some people at the SEC office that now they may be saying this to make themselves look better, that the Big Ten contract, the numbers are actually inflated a little bit. Now, so I don't know. So if that comes back to the pack and we're comparing 300 million to what right now? 1.2 billion or something?
Yeah, 300 million to $1 billion per year.
Okay. So if we're comparing 300 to 400 million, I don't think that's a big difference either way. And they constantly re-up each other like quarterbacks in the NFL. Yeah. Right now, it looks stupid out of whack, but I don't know that it's going to look stupid out of whack 365 from now.
Okay, so 2030, what is it? It'll be 2033 this contract's up. Let's say hypothetically the SEC does get a deal. By that point, I mean, the SEC is going to be, as long as they hold firm and don't let the Big Ten cannibalize them from having so much power and money up until then, the SEC, can you imagine the deal they're going to be able to negotiate TV-wise after what the Big Ten just negotiated? I mean, we're talking they could do one. The SEC might have the leverage to go get Notre Dame at that point. But Notre Dame's going to realize they can make more money being in a conference with that TV revenue than what they can on their own. That's finally going to happen.
The thing about Notre Dame to the Big Ten, not only are they a better fit in the style of football and the region, is if you're Notre Dame, wouldn't you rather go to the Big Ten and have a rotation of really 2 elite teams and one team that has a couple of years every once in a while, and that's Penn State. So you're Michigan, Ohio State. If you're looking at your
biggest rivalries, conference rivals now.
Yeah, but if you're looking at the SEC, you've got right now Alabama and Georgia are locks. I mean, that's why I don't think LSU. I don't think that Notre Dame is ever going to go to the SEC. So, because right now, if you look at it, Alabama and Georgia are locks. Georgia's a long time lock. I don't want to look at it in a short span of time period, but I believe that Florida is probably eventually going to be good. They may have to get rid of detail-oriented Billy Napier, that's kind of like he's a really good guy that we talked about earlier in the show. He's detail-oriented. Well, great.
He tries hard.
Yeah, he tries hard. He tries very hard.
I actually don't think Napier's the reason they'll fail, though. I think it's actually there's issues with the program. That's why they're going to fail.
Well, I agree, but I just think with the talent, they'll get it cleaned up somehow, like Tennessee did. There's too much going for that program to be non-relevant for a long amount of time. But you may be right, because they were non-relevant before the 90s.
The thing that's working, and I'll tell you what, if the ACC is able to figure it out, which they won't, but say they do, say Florida State and Miami are just stuck in the ACC until, 2035 or whatever, say this never gets solved, you realize how good a shape Florida's going to be in at that point with them having revenue that's 3 times as much as the other 2 schools? They're going to recruit the whole state of Florida and have it on lock.
I think Billy Napier is the one individual that gets hurt the most if the SEC signs a new big TV deal, if that's somehow renegotiated, because Florida's going to look at him and go, we can do a lot better than that, dude. I mean, he can't even get Jaden Rashada paid, for the love of all that's holy.
That wasn't him, though. Come on, that was the NIL. I think I do believe, and we talked to some people at SEC Media Days. The narrative in Florida, at least, seems to be like, from people close to the program, seems to be that Billy Napier isn't the problem. It's the administration and the people and the boosters that are just so super disorganized.
Let me tell you something, and I'm only slightly exaggerating. Okay, if I'm Josh Heupel, and this is what happened to Billy Napier, he had a quarterback show up on campus. So imagine Nico showing up on campus, and there's not the money that he was promised. I'm going to go get a club, and I'm going to find the CEO in charge, and I'm going to Nancy Kerrigan him. So I'm telling you, that is embarrassing beyond losing one player. You can say it's not his fault, but ultimately it's all your fault when you're the head coach. And that got blown apart and was embarrassing.
I agree. And it's whatever. Well, we knew this last year. Remember, we were talking about Florida. You got a report. For those who don't know, I had just joined the show. And I did a report on On3 doing the largest NIL collectives in August. And Dave, I guess it was September, we were doing a show, talked about, you had heard reporting that Florida's NIL was not together. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. What we're realizing is Florida cobbled together their NIL the way the Mets tried to rely on Bernie Madoff to make to buy a World Series in the 2000s. And so that's kind of what happened. They cobbled an NIL together when they realized they were way behind. I will say, I'm laughing. Probably the worst take on ESPN ever made.
Worst prediction ever made.
Yes, it will be Ryan Clark saying that he wishes LSU hired Billy Napier instead of Brian Kelly.
Yeah, I can go with that.
That's the worst take ever.